Discovering Alabama is a production of the Alabama Museum of Natural History.
Ah, nature. Nothing excites kids the way nature does. And today we're at a special place where kids can mingle with nature through a variety of exhibits and activities designed to teach about Alabama's natural wonders. The really great thing about this nature center is that it happens to be in the center of nature. You see, it's located well off the beaten path, out among wildlands that are now protected as part of Alabama's Forever Wild program. Today, we're going to take a look at this educational facility, learn about the Forever Wild program, and get to know a man with a special love for Alabama's wildlands. I'm Doug Phillips. Join me for a visit to this nature center, here in a special place with a special story, all adding up to a wonderful world of nature for us to enjoy. This program is about a land unknown to many people, a land that in many ways has maintained its native natural wonders, a place of bountiful backcountry, forests, streams, and wildlife more diverse than can be found in much of the inhabited world. Come along with me as we explore the wild wonders of this land. Come along as we discover Alabama. Welcome to Discovering Alabama, and welcome to the Robert G. Whaley Nature Center, here adjoining a sizable tract of land that's now part of Alabama's Forever Wild program. If you're like me, you probably wonder why we have to have centers to teach kids about nature, about the natural world all around them. Well, the unfortunate truth is, for many kids in today's increasingly urban society, the natural world is not all around them. But even for kids from rural settings, the Robert G. Whaley Nature Center is a learning experience.
A nature center involves two concepts. Number one, it offers an individual a place to come and be in an outdoor area. I think the other aspect of a nature center, and probably a more important one, is not only to offer a person an opportunity to be outdoors in a natural setting, but to offer that person an opportunity for education as well.
The Robert G. Whaley Nature Center provides an opportunity for kids and adults in about a 7-county area to learn about the environment and proper land stewardship. The center features a surround sound theater for programs that can be tailored to different educational needs, for individuals or for school groups. The exhibit hall demonstrates wild habitats with emphasis on the conservation of habitat. At the Whaley Nature Center, sometimes even an old dog can learn a few new tricks. The story behind this nature center and this protected tract of land is both private and personal. Prior to state purchase of this land, it was in the private ownership of an individual with a strong personal interest in nature. The Robert G. Whaley Nature Center exists today because of the generosity of Bob Whaley. Mr. Whaley donated the land for the center and the financial support to construct the center.
This is a greenhouse we built initially to accommodate winter vegetables. And it worked quite well, but it was a lot of work. And so we eventually converted it from one thing to another. Now it's camellias, bougainvillea, and gardenias. And I've been a garden buff since I can remember, so I find it fascinating to watch these various things develop. Nephew gave me some amarilla bulbs one Christmas, and I kept growing them and separating them, and now we have, I would guess, several hundred amarilla bulbs. They seem to do awful well in under this greenhouse condition.
Bob Whaley has a rather fascinating relationship with nature and with the state of Alabama. Mr. Whaley made it possible for Alabama's Forever Wild program to acquire more than 1,500 acres adjacent to the Nature Center. The Forever Wild Whaley Tract is located in the Chinanooga Hills district of the East Gulf Coastal Plain. It's in Bullock County, a few miles west of Eufaula. A stroll across the property is a reminder of just how peaceful the Alabama countryside can be, and how Alabama wildlands provide a home for many beautiful and graceful creatures. Preserving natural habitat is one of the goals of the Alabama Forever Wild program. In 1992, the people of the state voted overwhelmingly to establish the Forever Wild program. In fact, the measure passed by a greater margin of support than any legislation of this type in the history of the U.S.
When we pulled together the Forever Wild Committee to talk about land acquisition for the state, the genius of it was that it pulled every possible interest group in the state together. And I remember going to the first meeting. There were 33 people in the room, and they represented so many diverse interests, many of whom had never talked to one another except through the news media. But the miraculous thing, and the facilitator of Forever Wild, Doug Phillips, I think did just a genius thing at the very beginning. He had each member write down their greatest fear about Forever Wild or about this kind of program and their greatest hope for it. And what we found out pretty much is we were unanimous that our greatest fear was that it would become too political, and our greatest hope for it was that it would do something good for Alabama.
Be sure that we do things that and we think not only he approved, but the legislature will pass.
You know, the committee, I don't know how you decide. We're talking about a broad area here, and there's going to have to be some give and takes.
I think it's national consensus that what we're about in terms of land acquisition is appropriate.
Well, Forever Wild is simply what it says. It is there forever. And that's the important part. It can never be changed. So we're creating green areas for folks down the road, for our children and our children's children. You know, Alabama, we've got a tremendous amount of wonderful forest and all associated with that. But, you know, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 500 years from now, folks are going to say, wow, you know, those guys are pretty smart so long ago to buy all this up and hold it together. And again, Forever Wild is what it says.
Alabama's Forever Wild program has obtained a host of special lands and waters across the state. To name just a few, the 209-acre Monsanto tract in Marshall County serves as an extension of Lake Guntersville State Park and provides nesting habitat for the local population of bald eagles. Among the smallest of the Forever Wild purchases is the Pike County Pocosin, about 150 acres or so of unique terrain and habitat. And then there is the Forever Wild purchase by which all others may be measured, close to 50,000 acres of the Mobile-Tensas Delta. Alabama's Forever Wild program is administered by the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. To make land acquisitions, they use a percentage of the profits on the sale of offshore natural gas. And often they're helped by others. For example,
the Mobile-Tensas Delta purchase was a historic partnership between these public and private partners to purchase 48,000 acres of land. Forever Wild was a leading partner with most of the responsibility or financial responsibility, but the partnership was made possible by a loan from the Alabama Wildlife Federation. The Nature Conservancy and Ducks Unlimited contributed financially. In addition, the Nature Conservancy wrote a National Coastal Wetland Grant that brought another $960,000 towards the project.
The Mobile-Tensas Delta purchase was the largest conservation acquisition in Alabama's history. It was made possible by the partners who pooled their resources and their expertise. The availability of resources and expertise are certainly important, but there's a third ingredient that's fundamental. That ingredient is the desire of Alabamians to keep unique natural areas forever wild. Okay, let's say you or someone you know owns a special tract of wildland that you think is worthy of protection in the Forever Wild program. What do? Where do you go to check out this possibility?
From a landowner's perspective, if the landowner is interested in his or her land being considered for Forever Wild acquisition, they should first of all contact the State Lands Division. All they need to do is to write a simple statement, "I'd like to nominate my land for consideration by Forever Wild." There's no magic in it. That's all they're required to do. At that point, we will contact them and try to determine as much information as possible about the land, and it would be evaluated from there and considered by the board.
Good afternoon. During the last couple of weeks, we sent some correspondence to the board regarding business that was put before the board at the last meeting, specifically.
So the board meeting is the time when we actually go through the process, and we do it in a way that the public has an opportunity to see what we're doing and express their feelings about what we're doing.
Just asked me to serve as chairman for this meeting.
It could be implemented before us coming back.
The Forever Wild program cannot condemn property. It can only buy from willing sellers. Once it's determined that a nominated property is available, the divisions within the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources evaluate the land.
Come out and see it.
We query our database. We provide information, maps, soil types, any information we have on the tract to our sister divisions, Wildlife and Freshwater Fisheries and State Parks. They also evaluate the nomination. That way it's evaluated from all four of the categories that the Forever Wild program buys land for. The four categories are nature preserve, recreation area, state parks, and wildlife management area.
Many Forever Wild purchases fall into more than one category. The 3,000-acre Sipsey Swamp purchase, for example.
The Sipsey is another good example of an acquisition that falls under multiple categories. It was acquired, it was scored, evaluated, and acquired as a recreation area acquisition and also as a nature preserve acquisition. In managing the property for recreational opportunities, we are facilitating passive opportunities like hiking, bird watching, horseback riding, bicycle riding, canoeing, and we're also facilitating some other recreational opportunities like hunting and fishing. We will continue to improve the opportunities that are available to the public from that tract.
Of course, Forever Wild can't afford to purchase every property that becomes available, nor is every property necessarily appropriate for the program. There are other options.
Well, there are a lot of alternatives. We found that most property owners want to do the right thing. They're interested in protecting plant and animal species, but they want to hold the title, and that's frankly fine. We have some real cost-effective ways to help conservation. One is conservation easements.
Well, if you're interested in conservation easements in Alabama, there are a handful of land trusts in Alabama. Of course, my organization, the Alabama Forest Resources Center, we're mainly interested in working forest lands. Other groups like the Nature Conservancy of Alabama take conservation easements, but they have to fit within their criteria, which basically includes land with threatened and endangered species on it. There's the Land Trust of Huntsville in North Alabama. There's the Coastal Land Trust. Then also the Forever Wild program is authorized to take conservation easements, as is the Lands Division of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources.
One thing the Conservancy intends to start is a Natural Areas Registry program, and that is a totally voluntary program where you agree to protect your land and work with the Conservancy in management decisions, but it can be withdrawn at any minute. There's no legal binding contract.
Like Forever Wild, the Nature Conservancy often buys property outright. Their reasons for purchasing property, though, are sometimes a bit different from Forever Wild.
Forever Wild has broad interest because there are recreational interests, hunting and fishing, and the Nature Conservancy's categories our primary focus is to protect the plant and animal species there and the habitat. A lot of our preserves are not open to the public. In fact, I call many of them precious places because they have extremely rare plant or animal species, and you have to really minimize the human interaction with some of our places.
Preserving Alabama's wild and wonderful places is an ongoing process that involves many, many people, some from government, some from the business community, some from environmental groups like the Nature Conservancy. Ultimately, though, conservation of our state's precious places depends on the personal cooperation of individuals with private land holdings.
You know, on the whole, private landowners have done a wonderful job in Alabama. You know, what you see around Alabama is really the result of private landowners doing an excellent job of managing their lands on their own.
Bob Whaley's relationship with nature and with the state of Alabama is a perfect example of how private individuals can make a difference.
The Whaley Tract was an acquisition that was made possible by a generous gift from Mr. Whaley. Mr. Whaley, in fact, donated $1 million of the value of the tract to the Forever Wild program.
Sure. You're so pretty. You're so pretty. Oh. Come on, Mr. Beautiful. Well, Snake, he's a celebrity. He's the only dog allowed to bark in the kennels. He won the national championship and the best dog of the year. You are such a pretty horse. Oh, my. Yeah. You are such a pretty horse. Yeah. Go, thank you. You want a drink?
The Whaley Tract was a unique acquisition in that it was a life estate. And in that acquisition, we've gotten to know Mr. Whaley, and we've learned of his great interest in conservation, and it's really produced some wonderful relationships with him.
Upland pines and bottomland hardwoods are the dominant forest type on the property. These types of habitats in the coastal plain have been known to host some interesting critters.
The Whaley Tract is still managed by Mr. Whaley, but that's a great relationship because he's such a fantastic steward of his property. He manages the area for quail, and in doing that, it provides some wonderful habitat for some rare birds like Bachman sparrow. There are bottoms and wetlands associated with the creek drainages that run through the property. He's created a number of ponds that offer great habitat for reptiles and amphibians, and also waterfowl. There's a number of resident geese and ducks on the property, and there's even a heron rookery on one of the small lakes. It truly is a treasure.
The Whaley Tract is in Bullock County, and as you know, the relic trillium is found in Bullock County, which is an endangered species. And the location of it is about maybe 5 or 10 miles from the Whaley Tract, and they have similar habitats. And we're trying to work with the Fish and Wildlife Service as maybe reintroducing or reestablishing the relic trillium on the Whaley Tract.
The Forever Wild Whaley Tract is such fine habitat that the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources is entertaining the prospect of reintroducing such rare species as gopher tortoises, red-cockaded woodpeckers, and indigo snakes. And though the land is a paradise for wildlife now, it hasn't always been so. When Bob Whaley purchased the property back in the early 1970s, it was used up land that looked less like a heaven for wildlife and a lot more like, well, that other place.
It was cotton country, badly worn out, badly eroded. I recognize the problems, lack of fertility and all, and I was determined to rebuild it and regenerate the depleted topsoil and let nature take over. And nature's done a great job.
A native of Rochester, New York, Bob has bred and raised champion horses and field trial dogs for years. In southeast Alabama, the heart of field trial country, Bob found a home from which to pursue his passion. The fact that the property is near field trial country turned out to be a blessing for Bob Whaley and for the land itself. Nature can produce remarkable wonders if we just allow it to do so. At least that's Bob Whaley's contention. And there's another radical philosophy that Bob holds is true.
Well, we're in the Garden of Eden here compared to the rest of the world in every way. I mean, space, air. Most of our air is pretty clean coming off the Gulf of Mexico, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here. There's no major city contaminating the air. And this breeze you're getting right now is pretty clean and fresh. So we're so lucky to be in Alabama.
It's such a great, beautiful, wonderful state, more rivers than any other state, more river transportation than any other state. The diversity and beauty of our state is just something to behold. But one of the things we've got to do, we've got to improve the way in which we keep up our state. Somehow or another, we've got to train our young people that our resources are very delicate and very precious. And we hand them on to this generation. You do a good job of keeping that so you can hand it on to the next generation. I think one of the things we need to do is educate people on the beauty of Alabama and how much it needs to be preserved.
It is not only a philosophical issue, but it's a dramatic demographic issue when you think about the movement of people in Alabama from a rural to an urban setting. The real tragedy in that is that children in particular lose any contact, with the natural heritage, They say now we're about 2 or 3 generations removed from the land. Many children have never walked in the woods or, camped out at night or gone hunting or fishing and that sort of thing. And the farther we get away from that, the greater the risk is that we lose sight of the value of our natural heritage and the forests and streams and things that we have.
The beauty, the natural charm of Alabama are attracting more and more people to our state. I've talked to men and women from around the nation, from around the world, who've settled here. Ironically, the natural attractions that bring folks here often suffer from the pressure of increasing population.
Alabama is not only important on a state level, a national level, but globally, and especially in our aquatic diversity. And of course, like all Alabamians, and I'm a native of the state, we've wanted it to grow. We know we need economic growth if we're going to ever do good things for our people here. So that's coming. But as more and more businesses come, more and more land is lost. So what I would really like to see is to have some good science planning in addition to those that recruit a business and get the tax credits and that kind of thing, incorporate science, like the Nature Conservancy science, into statewide planning efforts, and therefore we can plan better for our industry, our growth, and yet not give up our natural heritage. It's the most precious thing Alabamians have, and other people outside Alabama are totally envious of it. We just take it for granted.
William Shakespeare said, "One touch of nature makes the whole world kin." The kinship you and I feel as a result of our natural heritage reaches beyond the borders of Alabama. And these natural bonds of kinship will continue as long as we can keep much of our state forever wild.
This program is supported by grants from the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, the Alabama Wildlife Federation, and Legacy, Partners in Environmental Education.